Hi, welcome to the apiary here at Metropolitan Community College. This is the horticulture department. We're standing in our kind of barnyard lab space that we do a lot of different things in with a lot of different classes. But right now we're here because we're in our non-credit beehive bee class. Today we're going to be taking a look at our langstroth hive, going through it, kind of doing a basic hive instruction. My name is Tyler Bagdison. I worked here for 3 years, and I've been keeping bees for roughly 5 or 6 years, a few years since before I came here. So to start, when I'm coming up to a hive and looking and getting ready to go into it, I'm just going to look at what the bees are doing based on kind of what the weather has in store and what the weather's been like. It's been pretty hot and dry the last couple days, although we just had a rain on Wednesday, 2 days ago. And so just knowing that, I would expect to come up here and think that we have a lot of flowers producing a lot of nectar and a lot of pollen right now. It's midsummer. Golden alexander is blooming, yarrow, elderflower, a lot of great flowers that I would expect to see bees on. And so when I come up here and see kind of a happy, healthy hive, lots of bees coming in and out, baseline, that lets me know that things are probably pretty okay in there right now. I'm not going to go in there and find disaster. I can see a lot of bees coming up to the hive with pollen in their back abdomens, carrying pollen. If we get a good picture of it, it just looks like they have yellow, large hind legs. Again, that could be coming from a lot of different stuff. Right now, because we have so much in bloom and we had a recent rain. Other bees coming back with nectar for sure. So that makes me think they're gathering enough food, they're finding enough food. The kind of extended 2-week period without rain wasn't too harmful to plants. They can find the pollen and nectar they need right now. So usually when I suit up to go into a hive, I'm going to be just wearing a face mask and gloves, but today, since we're going to try and go all the way through the hive, I'm going to kind of put on my full suit. And so that is just a zipped up and velcroed up suit that has an elastic band at the bottom tied around my waist so I don't get bees coming up, and then a hood that zips and clasps that also doesn't allow bees into my face. I'm not wearing long pants today. That could have been a good decision, but I also find that when I get stung, it's all up in here usually. So I like to protect that part, and I can probably move forward with a leg sting more than I could something hitting me on my face or my arms. Got long leather gloves, so they're going to protect my hands, and also have smoke. We use smoke in hives to calm down the bees. It stimulates a response in them where they are worried about their hive being burned down or something happening, and they kind of go and gather a bunch of honey and get more lethargic or slow down with all that honey weight. They're kind of anticipating that there could be a fire and they could need to leave, so they're going to fill up their bodies with honey so they could take that with them, or nectar. So I've already got my smoker going here. This is a very standard smoker that you can buy from many bee supply stores. I like to use pine needles in it. They catch really quickly, but also kind of burn a little bit longer than just like leaf matter would. So I've had it going. I got a little more here. We're not trying to get a raging fire going. We're not trying to blow smoke signals that you can see in Council Bluffs. We just really need a little bit of smoke. And we're gonna kind of get down and put a few puffs into the front of the hive. Again, we're not trying to completely smoke them out either. We just want to kind of get that smoke percolating through the hive. We also use a screened bottom board, so we don't have a solid board here. It's open to the air underneath. So I kind of like to put a few puffs of smoke under there to let that kind of percolate up through the hive as well. And then I usually just set my smoker off to the side, let that kind of hang out for a little bit. You don't want to go in right after you've done that. You want to kind of give the bees some time. Everything in a hive is kind of slow and deliberate and patient. We're not trying to rush anything, and the slower you move and the less sudden movements or jolts that the bees experience, the calmer experience it's going to be for them. They came as a nuke, so a box with 4 frames in it with a queen that we then lifted and put it inside our hive with additional frames to go along with it. Gave it probably 3 weeks, and then 2 weeks ago, I would say, we put our second box on top because we noticed their population was growing and we wanted to give them more space to expand and didn't want to trigger that swarming instinct that can happen. So the tool, the only tool I'm really going to use today is our basic hive tool, standard hive tool used across beekeeping. There are different designs that have different hooks on them that make it easier to lift up, especially heavy frames that have honey in them. But for today, this is going to be all I need. So I'm going to come back here and usually everything in the hive is kind of sealed up by the bees with a hard, tacky substance. When it's hot, it's a little more tacky and less hard. But I'm just going to gently pull and try not to pop things too hard off of their place. Taking off our roof. Got our top cover here that gives a little space for the bees to come out. Slowly just working the corners to release it. Once it's released, gently taking it off. This is the first place where I'm going to stop and kind of look at the bees that are up here, inspecting their bodies for any mites that might be kind of living in the space between their thorax and their abdomen. So right up from the last body section, there's kind of a little curved place where the next body part starts, and in there sometimes you can see mites. You can also see them behind their head sometimes, but right now I don't really see any. It's not the time of year that you would really expect to start seeing heavy mite populations. Bees are looking happy, healthy. They're talking to each other and pretty calm. One thing that you can tell from a hive is kind of like how the queen is doing, or how the hive is doing, is if the bees are calm like this, they're not freaking out, they didn't explode out of here at me or start forming a giant cloud, that means that the queen's in there, her natural pheromones are in the hive, and that the bees aren't freaking out because of that. Sometimes if you open up a hive and you had lost a queen for some reason, you can tell instantly just by how agitated the bees are, because they don't have those kind of pheromones calming them down. So the next thing I'm doing is like giving them a minute to kind of swell up, is how I check kind of how full the hive is of bees and whether I'm thinking of adding another box onto the top. We have 2 hive bodies here, so the next box I would be adding would be a honey super, which is about half the height of one of these. And those are the boxes that we're going to be taking on and off to manage the honey flow and honey harvest. Right now the bees aren't swelling really high up and filling the top of these frames. So I'm going to say maybe that's not an immediate need that we're going to need to do today. But I'm also going to look in here. I do see a lot of bees across inside all the frames, so I think we have a really healthy population. We work with a 10s bar langstroth. Langstroths come in 8 bars or 10 bars, and that's just how many frames can fit inside of here. And usually a beekeeper stays with one or the other because all the equipment is standardized, and so if you're working with 8 frame boxes, you probably want to keep 8 frame throughout all your hives, and we use 10. So on the edge here, I'm just prying up with my hive tool. Again, because it's pretty warm, things are pretty easy to gently move around. It's when we get into the colder months in the fall that it gets really hard not to snap something or cause some sudden movement because of the colder temperatures. So I'm just slowly pulling this out. This is a former brood wax. You can see because of its black color, that's because bees have been laid in there as an egg and hatched out of it. And so it's older. We put old frames in here for them because the wax is already built up and then they don't have to build the wax themselves. The wax building can kind of be one of the most the slowest and most intensive kind of activity for the bees. And if you give them frames that are full of wax, they can move a lot more quicker to build up their honey stores, their pollen stores, and lay their eggs. So initially, just looking at this, I can see glistening nectar in here that's getting filled up in all of these frames. I can see bees that are either depositing nectar or engaging in the process of breaking it down with the enzymes in their stomach, removing water from it and getting it to a stable, consistent form that we call honey. And then I can also see the cells that have already gone through that whole process that have been capped, that have the wax over the top of them. This is really great. This is showing me the bees are doing a lot of good honey harvesting, honey processing. We got the same here on the back. You can see that glisten in the sun. Just sliding it back in really gently, letting it fall into place. I'm going to assume most of these frames are probably in a similar state, but I'm going to pull up one more to look at it before we go any further down. Just get a sense from another side what's going on there. Slow, deliberate movements. Cool. So over here, we got something different going on. We can see that these cap cells aren't capped in the same way the honey ones were. The honey ones are more flat. These have just a slight bulge to them. That's because they are bee larvae. You can actually see kind of in between those cap cells, little white dots. Those are larvae eggs that have been laid and are now, a few days to a week old. Eventually, a nurse bee will come and cover the top of those larvae like they have here, and they'll continue to develop, and eventually, once they're fully developed, they will eat their way out of their own cell. So I see lots of good lay-in in a, not like a perfect pattern, but it's not spread out over the entire frame. It's all kind of in one area. That's another sign that the queen is kind of laying regularly and has a good habit disposition. Sometimes when you see erratic laying, that means the queen is stressed or is getting older and might be a sign that you'd want to replace your queen. I'm also going to glance around and just kind of look for the queen since we see more freshly laid eggs here. The queen is quite large compared to the other bees, and so it should stick out. I'm not seeing anything right now. I do see a clump of bees that I'm gently going to move, but no queen in there. But lots of bees doing lots of work and still being really calm. The fact that they're still calm right now is a great sign that this hive is really healthy. The fact that we saw so many eggs up here makes me want to look at one more frame and just see if the queen might be up in this box. Usually the queen kind of stays in one area, and most of the time, in my experience, it's in the bottom box, but I want to try and see if we can find her today. So I'm going to check another frame in here. More larvae, more capped larva cells. Lots of worker bees moving about. Yep, but no queen in this section right now. One cool thing in this, so we have a lot of different things going on right here. We have larvae, we have honey, we have cap honey, we have cap larvae, but we also have these cells down here that are shining kind of bright yellow like the sun. Those are the cells which they have packed their pollen into. There are ways that you can harvest pollen that don't involve kind of scraping it out of here. The pollen's down in this area. You can put a pollen trap on the front of the hive for a couple days, normally in spring or when kind of the most pollen is going, whether in trees or in perennials, other perennials. And the bees will have to crawl through that pollen trap. It brushes the pollen off their bodies and then falls into a sifter that you can take out. We haven't used that yet, mainly because it's really invasive on the bees and really hard on them. It causes a lot of damage. But it's a cool thing I would like to try in the future. So I'm gonna now split their home in half. I'm gonna take this top box and put it on our stand over here, and we're gonna look and see what's going on in the bottom box. This is where, you know, if your home got cut in half and you didn't know where it was for a little bit, it might freak you out, and I would expect the bees to start getting more agitated, maybe start bumping into me, which is a sign that they're kind of done with you being in the hive. So we'll kind of go about this a little more quickly. We don't want to leave them separated too long. But it's going to be the same procedure I used before, just working at the corners to gently unglue it, unstick it. The top one isn't fully filled with honey, so it's not going to be 70 or 80 pounds, but it's still going to be pretty hefty. So I'm going to lift it up on one side, try to. And then lift it up from the back. Yeah, good 50 pounds, and just set it right over here. Again, bees are looking really great. Looking down here for mites like I did on top. Looking to see if there are any other species of insects inside the hive, like hive beetle, small little black round beetles. I'm not seeing anything, which is great. I'm gonna pull out some frames like I did on the top one. This one's really empty. It's really light. They're putting a little honey in here. I see a little bit of pollen, but not much is going on, which is kind of surprising compared to how much was going on in that top box. Usually I see most of the activity in the lower box. Put that one back. Go for one in the middle. Sometimes the ones on the outside end up being just not filled as quickly or having as many bees on them as the inside. So we'll take one of these middle ones. A cool, interesting thing going on right here. We have a dead bee with a bunch of bees kind of around it, clustered on it. I don't know if they're trying to break up the body so they can remove it piece by piece. That's a cool, never seen that before. You can see the bees right outside the entrance of the hive are getting a little more agitated. I can hear them, the volume's increased. Down here we got pollen, we got eggs, we've got capped larva cells. All the wax is totally built up. It's looking pretty good. There are some spots where they still need to fill in some wax around these corners that they haven't done. Sometimes they never get around to doing that, but eventually the whole frame should be filled out to the same depth with wax. You can kind of see it isn't around that edge there. Pull up one more frame, look at another part of this hive. This is one of the frames we got from the nuke box that we ordered. It's a little different. So it's been in there a long time. It's getting filled with honey. It's getting capped. You can tell the bees on this one, probably the bees in the rest of them are moving a little faster, vibrating a little quicker, showing signs of agitation. But otherwise, like the rest, I'm not seeing any major problems. I'm not seeing any major pests. I'm seeing signs that my queen, wherever she is happy, is laying well. I'm seeing signs that the rest of the hive is gathering and finding enough food, pollen, and nectar. I'm not seeing any mold, wetness inside the hive, so I know my hive is sealed up appropriately. And that's great. I mean, this is kind of what I'd expect to see this time of year. A perfectly functioning hive, really ramping up nectar gathering and honey production, getting to the place where maybe in a couple weeks I'll think about putting a honey super on. You know, there wasn't the ratio of capped to uncapped nectar and honey was pretty skewed to uncapped, so that's telling me they still got a lot of work to do in the rest of the hive, and that putting on a honey super right now might not be the best thing because it expands the size that they need to work in, and they'll be less efficient about finishing up the honey stores that they need to gather for themselves in the bottom two hive body boxes, and that I don't want to stress them out by adding that next level of space that they have to patrol and manage as well. When you make your hive too big for the number of bees you have, you're just inviting other insects in to take advantage of the fact that they can't defend all that territory. So I think I'm gonna get ready, just put the hive body box back on top, put the top back on, and be really happy about where this hive is today, Friday, 12th of June. Again, being slow and patient as you're putting stuff away. Sometimes in this stage, the bees can be really aggravated and angry, and you might be feeling stressed yourself, like you want to just get out and have a successful day in the hive without getting stung. But again, slow, deliberate moves. I was taught it's important to slide things on so you're not crushing the bees and you're giving them a chance to get out of the way. Do got a few spider webs up here that I will evacuate. Great. That's a basic, really easy hive inspection of this langstroth hive. I'm glad we could walk through it together. Thanks.